G'day guys, welcome to another episode of Unlocking the Secrets to Expanding Human Consciousness. Michael, I got it right without fucking it up. Well done.
Good job.
Welcome to you.
Good evening.
Good beard. For those of you watching on YouTube, Michael's growing a beard.
Yes. Greg dared me 2 weeks ago.
Yes,
So
yeah, he's already beating me. I've been looking forward to this, Michael, very, very much so, because he's a great man, a great mentor, and somebody who's got a wealth of knowledge. And we thought this week we would go and tip our little toes into consciousness. And we thought we would go on the back of what we talked about last week, which was pretty controversial. We thought, well, let's go the full whole hog here and talk about consciousness. We thought,
all in.
Who do we know that would love to talk about this? We thought, well, we just go and ask straight to the top. We go ask the great man, Craig Harper. So welcome, Craig, to
I thought you were going to call him God then.
Well, he's
fucking hell.
10 years in the making, this.
How's that for an intro?
Fucking hell, that's amazing. That's I want to know who this great person is that we're getting on. When is he coming? That's the biggest pump up of all. What you got to do is you got to set the bar low, right? So,
all right.
Just go, Craig Harper's shit, but he was the only person that's available.
Actually, we found this guy off the street. We thought we'd just get him in. He looked like he needed a job. So
no, that's me with the hobo beard.
I just turned my heater off because it's about 13,000 degrees in here, and I feel like the temperature's going to rise. I think that was some kind of download, but no. Thank you for having me, boys, and it's great to connect, and it's nice to see pretty, albeit hirsute faces.
And you like your T-shirt, Harps, which I stole off you.
I do.
I didn't get the memo.
I do like the fact that you're representing, and I did like the look on Michael's face when I handed it to him, and his eyes lit up like a fucking 4-year-old at Christmas. And then the disappointment when I said to him, "Can you give this to Greg?"
It's all right. I've got a couple.
Yeah, mate.
I don't love you any less.
That's all right. Thank goodness for that. But it's not a conditional relationship that we have. But well done, boys, on the podcast. Is this number 9 or 10 episode?
This is number 10.
Number 10.
Well done, because a lot of people don't get past 5, and you've got a few listeners, and you're growing an audience, and you're doing some good shit, and you're having some conversations a lot of people won't or don't or can't have. So good on you.
Thanks, mate. And we thought, well, we really want to go deep into this somewhere, and this is going to be part one of a multi-part talk about consciousness, because you can't talk about that in an hour, right? So we thought that, you know, you've got a wealth of knowledge, and a lot of people don't know this, because we know the spiritual side of you. There is a massive spiritual side of Craig Harper, but tell us a bit about yourself, Craig, just for the listeners and the audience who don't know who Craig Harper is, and may have been under a rock for the last 30 odd years, but just give us that 5-minute brief of the man, Craig Harper.
Well, thank you.
Pressure.
None at all. Well, as I said to you before we got started, most people in the world have never fucking heard of me, so don't be deluded by my very small band of merry misfits that follow me. But my background is in health and wellness and fitness, and I was I'll jump around a little bit, but I set up Australia's first personal training centre in 1990. I started working in fitness in 82. I'm 56 now. I guess the genesis of me was working with bodies, anatomy, physiology, biomechanics. How do we look better, feel better, function better on a physiological level? I opened businesses. I owned my own gyms, as I said, first PT Centre, but then I opened a few more. So I had 4. I had a couple of other businesses. I've written a bunch of books. I've written 9 books. I went back to uni a little bit later in my 30s and did a degree in exercise science. University lecturer. When I finished my degree, worked with a bunch of Olympians and athletes, sporting team, Club, Melbourne Vixens, Melbourne Phoenix, Nissan Motorsport, Port Melbourne in the VFL, blokes in prison, addicts, alcoholics, the general public. And I guess the one thing that everybody has in common, or had in common, that comes to see me is that they want to create better results, a better existence, whatever that means. That means different things for different people. And I guess starting in the fitness, wellness, body space, and you two know this, so I won't bore you too much with it, but I got to a point quite quickly where I realized that I was pretty good with bodies, as in I understood how to change a body, but what I really needed to understand on a deeper level was how humans work, because it's the human driving the body, and it's the psychological, emotional, and some might even say spiritual stuff platform from where often the physical transformation takes place. Started speaking when I did my first paid speaking gig about the time I launched my business. I was about 26, 30 years ago. I was terrible. I was probably terrible for the first 10 years. Some would still argue I'm terrible now. But I've been in front of audiences for a very long time, corporate, public, academic, and I'm just fascinated. You two know, I'm fascinated with humans. I'm fascinated with the way we think and act and believe and breathe and interact and disconnect. And I'm fascinated with the cognitive and the stuff beyond the cognitive. I'm doing a PhD at the moment in neuropsychology and a thing called external self-awareness, which is essentially it's kind of very new. So I'm pioneering a little bit. There's a bit of it out there, but I'm creating some science around how we are perceived and experienced and understood and processed by other human beings, and our ability to know that and to understand that. So, and I've always believed and experienced personally that we're not just bodies, and we're not just brains or minds, and we're not just emotional systems, and we're not just spirits. We're all of it. We're spiritual, mental, emotional, creative, sociological creatures. And, we inhabit this physical world, and we move around for 70 or 80 or 90 years or however long it is. And we navigate and negotiate all the practical realities of being human. And so, I wrote something the other day, which I think one of you saw, which was referring to the duality of the human experience. And that for me really just represents the fact that, that there's the world that we inhabit, and then there's the world that inhabits us. And I started in world number one, and the last 10 or 20 years, I've really been firmly entrenched in number two, the world that inhabits us. And for me, that's where we do internal space of mind, of emotion, of spirit, is where we really live, and the external stuff is where we kind of do life. And I think it's important that we don't put all our eggs in one basket, because while we are spiritual creatures having a fucking physical experience or whatever we want to call it, at the same time, we're still got to pay bills, and we've still got to feed our kids, and we've still got to get to work, and we've still got to kind of manage our mind. And, life's not all about mung beans and caftans and, getting into the next level. But at the same time, neither is it about fucking paying bills and building biceps and Insta following. So for me, I'm fascinated with the totality of what it means to be human.
What a segue. Wow.
That was one of my questions. What does it mean to be human? Tick. What's valuable about being human? I mean, it's, did you come over here before and just, you've been
Yeah.
Well, with that in mind, I guess, that experience of the body and the mind. So what role, how do you define consciousness, and what role does it play now with this awareness you've got about both sides of the ledger, at least in the physical sense?
Yeah.
And kind of where's it taking us?
So I think it depends who you ask that question to. Generally, consciousness, obviously, in a physiological sense, is being conscious, not being asleep, having your brain working on a conscious level. But what you're talking about, mate, is, consciousness for me is, it kind of integrates a little bit with self-awareness and an awareness of self, an awareness of that beyond self, greater than just the knowing. Greater than just that logical, cerebral, cognitive landscape that most of us live in most of the time. And you've heard me say this, but for where consciousness starts, almost consciousness starts, I think, when we begin to recognize our lack of consciousness. It's like real self-awareness arises, a recognition of my lack of self-awareness. It's when I know that sounds deep, but it's when
quite paradox.
yeah, when I realize how unaware I am, I'm starting to become aware. And because the truth is that we all grow up in a box, you know, whether that's a religious box, a spiritual box, a political box, a sporting box, a cognitive box, a way of thinking and doing and being and believing. And, you know, we've all been programmed. So everyone listening to this right now, from when they were born until this moment, listening to these words shared by us three, we've all been programmed and taught and told and trained. And so the challenge is to be aware of that and to try to figure out what there is and who we might become and what we might come to learn and open our mind and beyond our mind to ourselves, to our spirit, to beyond that stuff. You know, so consciousness really is opening the door beyond just the cognitive space for me.
Yeah, it's quite an interesting topic. I was thinking earlier before we came on how would I describe you, and I think you summed it up perfectly. It's almost like a modern day Socrates, where one of his greatest strengths was his awareness of how much he didn't know, and that almost opens that door to that conscious space. But then, can you be conscious of your own consciousness? Because you still only know what you know. It's
yeah.
It can be a bit of a.
I think one of the challenges in this space of opening the door on these conversations, I'm not trying to be too evasive. Somebody turn that ding off, will you? Hello. Is that we can get very cerebral about things that aren't cerebral, you know, and spirituality and anything kind of in that space doesn't make, in inverted commas, sense, if you know what I mean. It's not logical. But even when you think, so coming back to science, you go, well, what's science? Well, science is a thing that humans created to try to understand shit.
Exactly.
Well, and we created it with our level of understanding and our level of knowledge. But the truth, I believe the truth is there, and this is not a new thing to say, there is infinitely more that we don't know and understand than we do know and understand. But nonetheless, we judge the totality of everything with our very limited knowledge and understanding. And so, of course, a lot of spiritual things don't make sense when you're looking through the window of science, which is really the window of our intellect. And I believe that intellect gets in the way of the gifts. I believe that intellect gets in the way of sometimes the awesome stuff. We need intellect, we need brains, we need to think, we need to be able to think about thinking, metacognition, etc. But I think it makes scientific people, of which I am one in a way, but also not, it makes them nervous to think that there's this whole fucking universe of amazingness that they don't understand or know anything about. So it's much easier to go, well, can I see it, touch it, feel it, measure it? No. So it's not real. I can't quantify it. I can't put it under a microscope. I can't analyze it, and I can't prove it. Therefore, it doesn't exist.
We'll just chuck it under that banner of a mystical experience. I tend to agree with you. I think if you can't experience it through the senses, yeah, people find it hard to relate to.
Russell Brand talks about this a lot. You might have heard him talk about this, is what we're trying to do. You know, we're trying to understand stuff which isn't understandable, in inverted commas, with our tools.
Yeah.
With our psychological, it doesn't, of course, it doesn't fit within the construct of logic or science, but that doesn't mean it's not true or real. It just means we don't get it. It's just like you can blow a whistle and all the dogs run around like crazy. Doesn't mean there's no noise because we can't hear it. It just means that we don't have that ability. We don't have that tool that can hear at that level, you know, but nonetheless it's real, because we see the dogs who have something we don't have responding to a stimulus or something that's very real, but for us not real. Well, you'd say, well, there is no noise, there is nothing happening. Well, there's nothing happening because you don't have the right tool. And I believe that you know, so a part of it is being willing to not be gullible, but to be open to consider the fact that it's real. I just don't understand it. And I think that being vulnerable in a good way is when the learning and the growing can start.
So is consciousness then on the same continuum as awareness? So you can have an awareness of those things, but to be conscious of them, is it maybe something more that maybe you feel it as opposed to?
For me, it's, and again, you know, this is all subjective, isn't it? You ask 10 people one question about consciousness, you'll get 10 answers. But for me, it's like, this is how I describe becoming conscious to people, is when I take a journey through my mind, and it's like I literally picture my mind as a room, and I walk in a door, and now I'm in my mind, and I'm walking through my mind in this metaphor, and I'm walking past my experiences and beliefs and my doubt and my fear and my ideas and my biases and my prejudices and all this shit that inhabits this cognitive space that lives wherever. We think it's in the brain, could be in my fucking elbow, really, who knows? And then we get to the end of that cognitive space and there's a door for me. And it's when I get past all the other shit, that very logical, rational, reasonable, explainable shit, and I open this door, now I step into awareness and consciousness. This is where now I start to feel, for me, love and connection and oneness. And, you know, it's, you know, these are, depending on who you're talking to, these are not easy conversations to have. They are for me in this forum, because your audience and you, this is where you're at. But trying to have this conversation, you know, at Telstra when I'm doing a corporate, yeah, good luck with that, champ. I'll be wheeled out at minute 7.
One day.
Maybe.
And that's the hard thing. Like you know, Mike and I find you know, when you can talk about, so some conversations will talk about consciousness, how it was created. Like consciousness at the start was just the I am. It was just thought.
Yeah, the origin.
And it needed to know itself, so it created duality, and then from duality it created, you know, the Holy Trinity and all that kind of stuff, right? We can go into the whole biblical stuff, right?
Yeah.
And that's fascinating for some people. But if you've got someone in front of you, you know, who's struggling with a gambling debt, you know, if you go and talk about consciousness, you've just lost them. So I think the great ability you've got, Craig, is to be able to ascertain. You can talk that, you know, origins of consciousness if you wanted to with people, but also sit there and talk about, well, hey, I'm a normal bloke. I work in a bank and I need to go to work and come home and pay the bills. And how do I actually be self-aware and raise my consciousness in today's world, but still maintain some kind of normal, without going
practical
into
existence,
caftan winning, down the rabbit hole kind of all that stuff. So tell us about how do you relate to people and try and get them to raise their consciousness for what we would call normal people?
So I would think the starting point for me is, do they want to have this conversation, and do they want to open the door to this for them? And that will depend a little bit on how it goes. But the starting point for me is always, which is an old cliche, to understand and then to be understood. So if I don't understand the person, I'm fucked. Doesn't matter what my message is. Doesn't matter how much I think I'm enlightened. You know, on a very practical, cognitive, social level, if I don't have the skill to open the door to engage and connect and gain trust and develop rapport, then part 2 of this is redundant because they're not listening. So I think there's a constant integration of knowledge and skill and awareness, which is more in the spiritual space. But I don't think that the dude who's got to pay his bills and feed his kids and pay for school fees and work in the bank and probably is, you know, having a few too many beers, I don't think we need to wait. Well, I know we don't need to wait until he's sorted all that out before we open this door that we're talking about. You know, these things can coexist. And I think also, I was saying to someone this morning who was asking me something about this, and I said, in the same hour, I can go from, you know, the Dalai Lama to fucking Charles Manson. It depends, you know, because I'm still an idiot. Like, I've still got an ego. I'm still
The monkey brain.
I'm still huge. Like, doesn't matter. You're never going to get the humanity out of me, and I'm glad. But that is, I feel like there's a self-created level of pressure on us that we need to be spiritual. And so it's like people are critical, and I understand it, and I still love their guts. People are critical of me for swearing and talking the way I do. And by the way, I never say to anyone, I am spiritual, but when they know that I'm, you know, I have this component to who I am, maybe the biggest component of me, they go, well, that doesn't really go together. And I go, for who? Like, what do you mean? Like, where is that written? And if it is written, I didn't write it. Like, we have all these kind of, I think there's a lot of religious dogma that gets dragged erroneously into this space. And for me, religion has got nothing necessarily to do with what we're talking about.
But so, I mean, that's all the human experience. But, but when we drift into those moments where maybe we move away from love, is that an unconscious experience? And is that the point here that an elevated consciousness means that we're always operating in love?
No, well, maybe
Good question.
Not on Planet Craig, because I'm not elevated. I'm not elevated. I'm in the basement. I'm in the spiritual basement.
Oh, I don't know about that.
I'm just looking up at you guys. I'm going, fuck, where are the stairs? That's what I'm doing. Look, I think the more that you meditate, and I don't necessarily mean sitting on the floor with your legs crossed, but the more that you meditate on love, on purpose, on existence, on consciousness, and the more that you become what we might call enlightened or something, you know, in that space, more aware, more evolved, the better that you self-manage. And I am, you know, I was, and this is going to come as a massive shock to people, periodically an angry young man, but at the same time, very loving and kind, but, you know, insecure, big ego, insecure, lots of unresolved issues, but at the same time, a fascination with all things spiritual. And so I think we're kind of a dichotomy. I'm a dichotomy.
I think we all are.
But for me, the what I try very hard but don't always execute well is that for me, my home base is love, and that's like the mirror that I hold everything up to. And is this behavior, or is this response, or are these words coming from a place of love or a version of love? Kindness, service, patience, tolerance, care, empathy. Those can be manifestations of what I call love anyway. And I think,
there's probably
go on. Sorry, mate.
So it's probably a two-part question of this, and you mentioned the word ego before, but it's hard because when I'm sitting there and I'm doing readings for people and stuff like that, and you're sitting there, you're going, well, consciousness itself needs to know itself, so it needs to go and it wants to understand anger, it wants to understand hate, it wants to understand despair, but also in one way, it's also a point where it says we're out of alignment as well too. So it's also something. It's a very strange thing to balance, because it needs to know, consciousness needs to know itself through different experiences, and some of those experiences aren't good, right? But then, so are these things happening to us on purpose to know itself, or are they just things we're doing to bring us back to love? And then you've got the second part is that, well, how do you balance the consciousness versus our ego and our personality we incarnate this lifetime?
And let me add to it too. And is it conditional or unconditional love?
Can you guys ask easier questions? Because it's Friday night. Fucking hell. I would have eaten if I had known you were going to ask me this shit. Yeah,
Fuck.
look,
These are our normal
Can I
chats.
just Google that? Hang on. There's a part that comes back to, it's a different version, but the duality of, is that my higher self and lower self coexist. Whatever that means. But for me, it just means that, that as we used to say back in the day in church, that carnal me, that animal, that, that still is there. And I'm always, because I am, like it or not, I'm still human and I'm still fighting shit and dealing with shit. But, for the most part, for me, in a much better place. But I think that consciousness is, for me, maybe interchangeable. And again, this is different things from different people, but interchangeable with awareness of self beyond what I've been taught and told and trained. And awareness that I could be wrong about everything, and also at the same time okay with that. Like, I think we are addicted to having to know, and I think that in itself is an emotional and psychological prison. I think it's okay with not knowing. I feel like I know for certain, but I could be wrong, that there is a divine that's much bigger than me, that there is an intelligence, that there is a, fill in the fluffy terminology, whatever you want to use, that is far bigger and greater and enlightened than me, that I can tap into. I personally am not very enlightened at all, but I know that I can tap into that, whatever we want to call it, source, power, divine, love, God, when I get myself in that space. And I feel like that is, for all of us, that is the gift. But we are so preoccupied with the mind, and we are so preoccupied with what people think, and we're so preoccupied with how this sounds, and we're so preoccupied with whether or not this makes sense or seems logical to others, that we get dragged off the path.
So here's
Can we all
another,
do
here's
it?
another, I was going to say, here's another curly one for you. So aren't we all just a part of source originally anyway? So we're not separate from source, but we are separate in this three-dimensional world.
Oh yeah.
And we're separated to create individualism, but the real journey back home is to create unity. And that's maybe the journey in this world, is to actually see ourselves as part of source, or as part of God. So we're not separate from that, but we're a projection of that consciousness having the experience.
I think the delusion, I think separation is a delusion that the world has bought into.
Yes.
And that manifests in all of the division and the hate and the
focus on the small self.
Yeah. And I get it. I understand why that happens. But yeah, when we, I was talking to someone yesterday and I said, isn't it amazing that theoretically anyway, or allegedly, we are the most intelligent species, yet we can't even figure out how not to kill each other. Like, we can't even figure out how not to blow each other up. We can't even figure out how to, and I'm not trying to sound, political here, but it's just like, it hurts.
Real issues.
It hurts my heart when I think, when I see, 5,000 children a day die of malaria, I think the number is, and I'm not trying to go, and then we've got these fat cats living in, no, none of that. It's just like, why are we so intelligent, and why does this happen? And I
why
think
do we let it happen, I think, is the other important thing. Because if there's so many of us that are conscious, yet we still don't take action.
So back to my original question, is that actually part of source knowing itself through different experiences? So are we too attached to the other experiences other people are having? Because in one level, that soul has chosen that experience in some way or another.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Well, I think also, and I don't mean to get too Craig Harpery and too cerebral in a non-cerebral moment, but, you know, like you think about most of us in first world countries or in Western countries are born into this program that teaches us that success is about what you have and what you earn and what you own and what you drive and where you live and who you marry and what you look like and what you bank. And then, you know, then us three dickheads get on a podcast and like from the outside coming into this experience, you would go, what are they talking about? Because, you know, the story of success that we grow up with is it's invasive. It's like on a cellular level. But then the other kind of lack of consciousness, comes in the fact that even this is what mystifies me a bit, is so many people get there or a version of there. Okay, now I own this, drive that. I look like I've ticked all these boxes, but nonetheless, I'm still an overthinker. I'm still anxious. I'm still unfulfilled. I'm still scared of everything. So you know what I need? I just need a bigger TV. That's what I need. That's it. Fuck, if only I could have a 75-inch fucking Sony. No, don't be ridiculous. Don't be ridiculous. It's a fucking new nose. Whatever. But this lack of awareness that, okay, what I'm doing isn't working. So maybe it's not an external thing. Maybe it's, and I think we try and resolve psychological, emotional, and spiritual issues with external stuff. So we try and fill holes with things, but none of the things that we focus on, you know, you can't solve or you can't meet a spiritual need with a fucking telly.
Distractions.
Or with bigger biceps and this was, you know, because I came from that place of wanting to be loved and needed and wanted and connected and valued and all of that. And I always tried to get that through everything external. And you know, I had a few experiences in my early life where I just had some, what I called then God encounters, but we'll call them, maybe reframe them now and call them just very significant spiritual moments where in the middle of my desperation to be and to fit and to belong, it was like something reached down and just, you know, reached into my heart. And so for me, I had some really, and I don't share this publicly because it sounds completely fucking ridiculous, I know, but I had some massive moments which were the biggest things that had ever happened practically to me, times that by 50. And that was these moments when I went, it was like love or God or spirit or whatever source was saying to me, no, this is real. This is not your imagination. This is not a story. This is not a biochemical reaction to something you took, because I don't take anything. This is a real experience that doesn't make sense to you right now, but nonetheless, it's real. Don't forget it. And I remember when I had the first one of these experiences, it was like an out of mind, out of body experience. And the only thought that I could muster was, don't forget this, don't forget this, don't forget this. This is real. This is real. This is real. Like, I'm like, don't forget this. This is real. Don't forget this. This is real. Yeah. Because it was like, it was incomparable to anything. Incomparable.
Beyond
and
words.
It was like I just got inhaled by love. And I'm like, and I was at that stage 105 kilo, egotistical, maniacal, self-absorbed, insecure bodybuilder, and who wouldn't fucking, you could cut my leg off, I wouldn't cry. And in that moment, I was just tears and snot and convulsions and liberated.
Powerful.
Yeah. And going, oh, okay, so this, what I can see and feel and touch, this ain't all there is. In fact, this is maybe the smallest bit. Yep. But I think it's, not only do I think it's the biggest bit, I think it's all there is, but no, it's a very small bit of what there is to experience.
And you went on to a big thing there is that when you have that connection to love,
Yeah.
what just falls away?
Fear, everything.
Everything.
Attachment.
You know? And you think about in the moments when you connect with people deeply, when you're just
Time
tapping
stops.
into, it's like, oh, you know,
You're in a
there's
vortex.
this.
Well, perfect is the only way you can describe it.
Yeah. And all of the stuff that you think matters, not only does it not matter in that moment, you're not even aware of it.
But you're also bigger than you've ever experienced yourself as well too. You know that you are not this physical body.
Yeah. And it's like I've always, and I would never say this on any other podcast, but I've always felt, not because on any level I'm special. In fact, I've spent my whole life, I hide it very well, but I've spent my whole life, as many people have, feeling very unspectacular and very fraudulent. But I've always, not always, but for a long time felt that I could tap into the unfathomable. And it was always for me, like Michael, you've been at a couple of my events and it doesn't always happen, but a couple of times I did one a few years ago. I did one a few years ago, Greg, and listeners, where I did a 700 people event. So it's just called a Craig Harper Live. It was a 3-hour event at Deakin University, full room. And before I came in that day, I went deep. I sat in my car and I meditated, and I just kind of, this sounds weird, but in some ways it's true. I like offered myself up and went, whatever needs to happen today and whatever that means for me, I don't care, but I want that to happen. And I don't want this on any level to be about me or my skill or my knowledge or my ego. And it was like I was literally channeling something way bigger, smarter, more powerful than me for 3 hours. And we had, tapped into that.
The energy was extraordinary.
Yeah. And there was just people crying, laughing, having meltdowns, breakdowns, breakthroughs. And I know that wasn't me, because I'm very aware that I am a skillful speaker. So I can go and operate in skill and experience and knowledge, but this was not that. And when that finished, now that you go, oh my God, that is where I want to be, because that is where I'm tapping into the greater consciousness. That is where I'm tapping into, for me, the source, love, God.
So
Yeah.
tell us about it,
Amazing.
'cause you've sort of got there in a number of bits you've said before, but energy, and the energy in that room must have been seriously off the chart. And
Yeah, it was extraordinary, Greg. It was just something else.
You and I, Michael, we've experienced that when energy's just been totally off the chart. Tell us, Craig, your opinion on energy and matter in itself, and in a room like that, how did you feel, or what was it like? And as far as that thing that can't be measured but can be measured by the way you feel.
Yeah, look, I'm maybe going to struggle, but all I can say is that it's not, I think, it's like I know that something energetic is happening. It's not, well, part of it is physical too, I believe. There is an energetic exchange, but there's also a spiritual energetic exchange where I can feel like a presence, and I can feel like the presence fills the room, and everyone in that room is swimming in that. And it's like, for me, it's in that moment, it's like, I don't want that to stop. And it's like a privilege And if someone said to me, you can do that every weekend with an ever expanding number of people in the room, but you're never going to make money, I would say, I'm in right now. Not only are you never going to make money from it, you're never going to make money indirectly from it. I would go, I will do that every weekend of my life, because there's something that's far greater in that than all the shit that we value, or all the shit that we think matters. And for me, it's seeing, I feel like a lot of us are living unconsciously, and a lot of us are trapped in psychological and emotional and perhaps spiritual prisons, where it's our thinking and our believing and our lack of believing and our lack of awareness that controls us like a puppet master. And it's being, I feel like sometimes in some situations, all those strings are cut. And there's no one, it's just you. And it's just you in that space. I feel like I'm not answering any questions.
No, it's awesome, because I think what you're describing is almost that collective consciousness, where what Greg was alluding to earlier about this unity and this oneness. And when we tap into it together, what it creates is this energetic shift that's so far beyond words, but it's the most extraordinary presence to be in. And it's hard not to create something special when you're in that place.
Because you can see it because we're all energetic beings, right? You know, as football teams, you know, with Richmond, you know, when they were on, they were all connected. You know, when teams are off, they're not connected energetically. You can touch it. And that event there, would have loved to have seen the energetic auras it's just would have been melding with everybody and then mixing with everybody and all that stuff. Would have been fascinating to see on an energy level, all the auras and energy mixing with everybody else, and would have been off the chart. So
and it's just, you know, I think there's something to that, you know, when you and this is not about, it's not a cognitive thing either, but sometimes I'll meet someone and I haven't been told anything about them. I don't know them. And I'll just get near them. I go, oh, fuck, there's something incredible about this person. Or it might be conversely, fuck, there's something no good. And I'm not talking about the way they look, or it's not me being, you know, a detective and reading verbal and non-verbal cues and body language and physiology. No, it's not about that, because I can do that too. That's just basic NLP and fucking understanding neuroscience and fucking facial recognition, all that shit. But there's something else where there's an energy that people bring to every moment. And this is not my field of expertise, but I just know when I'm around someone that I go, I want to be around this person more. I want to know what this is, because they've got something that is quite special, or they're tapped into something that's quite special. And I think that for me though, as a speaker, coach, mentor, whatever, I think there's a bit of work that has to be done to get yourself, or for me anyway, to get myself in that place. If I just stumble into a gig and it generally doesn't happen. But if I do a little bit of prep where I sit down, I get out of my head, I get out of my ego, I get out of my preoccupation with the busyness of my life and the importance of me, because I'm extremely important, in case you both haven't realized. And I can get out of all of that bullshit and just be, and go in kind of as an empty vessel, not a full of myself vessel, but then I'm much more connected. And I have generally gone.
Yeah, I was going to say, but that's that principle that we know you, and you know, obviously we've tried to replicate that to some extent, where you're doing things in service. So you know, you're putting the broader experience above yourself, and that's where that, well, for want of a better word, fulfillment comes from.
And you know, the other thing too with this, which is awesome, is some people think anyway, that you either need to be, you know, a business person or a spiritual person or an entertainer, or you can actually be all of it, because it doesn't, I know in my business, this sounds funny, but sometimes the less businessy I am, the better my business goes.
I think,
And the more, and I mean, when I say authentic, I mean really authentic, not pretending to be authentic, which is very common. And I've done that too, where I've been role playing. But when you get past, you know, when I say, if I could have 1,000 or 2,000 people every weekend and we could do this shit and create this amazing experience for people, and I mean it. If anyone can organize that, I'm in. You've got me, right?
you've just thrown it out there to the ether. So just wait. It won't be long.
I would love that. I would love that. And but it's, you know, it's got to, you know, it's go where you're going to grow. I want to be around. I want to be in that space where I can grow and learn. And like you've both taught me things that you probably don't realize you've taught me, and whether or not it's directly or indirectly. But I think everyone's a teacher and everyone's a student, but you've got to be okay genuinely with being a student. And you've got to be okay with genuinely going, I'm all right with unlearning, you know?
Yeah, that's perfect.
We grow up with very rigid thinking, and we grow up with very rigid beliefs, and we don't even, and this is back in the cognitive space, but it still intersects, you know, where we grow up with set beliefs that we never actually chose. We just adopt those beliefs because of the people we've been around, and, you know, then we just kind of, it's like someone handed us a jacket at some stage, and now we're wearing that jacket. It used to be his, but now it's mine, and now his beliefs are my beliefs because I'm around him or her a lot.
You know, you remind me of a wise Yoda. You put some, you know, green ears.
I told you, Socrates.
He's, you know, and you must unlearn what you have learned. And look, so just to wrap it up, Haas, because, you know, this is just dipping our little toe into.
I've got pages of questions.
I know you have, Michael. I know.
I can tell you both if you want. I've got about another quarter of an hour if you want to do that, or I'm happy to wrap up in 2 minutes, whatever you want.
Well, there'll be a part two.
There'll be part two. I was just going to say, because the last question is probably, it's longer, but shorter, but there's probably no answer for it. I was going to say, for our listeners, if they could take one thing out of this podcast, what's something they can do today in their lives to help them raise their consciousness in whatever level they want to? What would your advice be? One thing they could do tomorrow that would help them raise their consciousness?
I would say, can I say a couple of things?
Got 15 minutes.
One is don't believe everything you think.
Yep.
Right? Two.
Actually, I want you to go back on that point. Don't believe everything you think. That's probably going to miss a few people.
Okay, so what I mean by that is...
that's important.
Because it's your own head.
Most people live in their thoughts.
Yes.
But thinking happens because of you, and thinking happens despite you, right? And so our brain, our mind is this, you know, very creative. It's very logical, you know, left brain logic, right brain creative, you know, and we are constantly
telling ourselves a story.
Yeah. And so there's, you know, without being too Craig Harper, but your listeners probably haven't heard this, but your brain is basically it's the HQ in your life. It's your headquarters. It's your data processing center. So we are always interpreting, analyzing, labeling, giving meaning to and power to things that happen in our external physical world. And so right now, for example, let's say 1,000 people listen to this, then there will be 1,000 different experiences. So even though everyone has listened to the same three men share the same three thoughts and ideas and articulate a certain way, nobody has the same experience. So then the question is, well, where is that experience coming from? Well, it's not coming from us three, because if the experience was determined by us, then everyone would have the same experience.
Mhm.
And this is a little bit, and so now I realize, oh, I'm the creator of my own reality, because my reality on a cognitive and emotional level, what's the matter, mate?
Well, I love
I'm
it.
loving it. I'm loving it. I love it.
Keep going.
Well, my reality is really, see, here's the thing. If I tell a story and I believe the story, even if the story's bullshit, nonetheless, that's now where I am. That is my normal. That is my reality. And so this is questioning being able to everything, not so that we begin to overthink or go down a rabbit hole of no return, but rather to go, well, actually, this is just my version. And maybe your version is right. Maybe it's healthy. Maybe it's unhealthy.
Mm.
But we unconsciously, you know, and so powerful is this that, and you both heard me say this, but when I believe, for example, you know, let's do an example now. If one of you boys said to me, look, Craig, I don't want you to freak out, but there's somebody that's just walk up your stairs behind you. And that, you know, now this is just a story. And he looks terrifying. Then I believe that story. It's not real. I believe the story. And now I think, fuck, I'm in danger. That's the story, which is a cerebral construct. It's not real. Then my emotional system kicks in, which is anxiety and fear and paranoia and right. And then my biology kicks in, adrenaline, cortisol, etc., heart rate, breathing, blood pressure, all that shit. And now I'm in the middle of a self-created experience, despite the fact that nobody's actually there. And now my literal experience is terror. So I've gone from calm in a conversation to a literal experience of being terrified, not because there's a reason to be terrified, but because I thought there was. Now, this is the beginning for me. This is the beginning of opening the door on self-management. And then going, well, if that's bullshit, what else am I holding on to that's bullshit? And how often every day am I creating negative experiences myself that aren't actually real in the physical sense, that aren't really a threat? And, you know, that's where we start to go, what's real and what's not, which is, you know, even that's a slip. What's true and what's not. We have 70,000 thoughts a day, give or take. 95% of those we had yesterday. Most of those are bullshit, you know, and a lot of our thinking, you know, you've both heard me talk about metacognition, which is thinking about thinking. This is starting to become, as Eckhart Tolle says, the observer of your thoughts, you know, and being aware of, well, that thought exists separate to me. That is just a construct. I don't have to believe it. I don't even have to pay attention to it. It's just something that arose from somewhere, and I'm going to watch that shit slide out of my consciousness, and there it goes, fuck off. I don't have to become it. I don't need to give energy to that. But you know, this is a work. This is a work because we confuse our thought with our self.
Mm-hmm.
We get our sense of identity and reality from a cerebral construct or a fear or an idea or a story or something that was planted in our subconscious by somebody at some stage who didn't have our best interest at heart, or maybe did, but was unaware.
Good answer.
Yeah, it's a good question. And then that consciousness that overlays is your ability to step away from that experience and recognize that it's there and rationalize it and get back into a rational state, I suppose.
And it's almost like when you can step out of yourself and go, oh, look at me doing this. I do this where sometimes I'll say something to someone and literally 0.001 of a second after it's come out of my mouth, I go, that was my ego. And I'm like, fuck, if only I was half a second earlier on that, I wouldn't have. But this is the beginning of awareness, and it's not about beating yourself up. You know, self-loathing serves no positive purpose. but self-awareness is it's like the healthy cousin. You know, where
So
you're going, cool.
So just to backtrack, what's the number one
Pushes,
thing you
doesn't he?
do?
Are you,
Yeah.
am I getting paid for this? Because if we
You get paid
is
in hugs.
Melissa, is
Send
Melissa
your bill to
invoicing
Greg.
you? Fucking hell. So, you know, it's Friday night and I haven't eaten. Sorry, what was your question?
So just to recap,
Chicken and rice.
what's the one thing? It's just to watch those. Well, the thoughts are not real all the time.
Well, I think it's to become aware of your thinking and realize that it and you are not the same thing. And, you know, to be conscious of, oh, where does that come from? I sometimes I'll get fearful of something and I'll go, what's that about? I get curious about the fear.
Yeah, perfect. Yep.
I don't inhabit the fear.
Yep.
And I go, oh, is that legit? Or is that, you know, some things we should be scared of because it saves us. But the majority, for me, the majority of my fears are actually irrational and unhealthy and unnecessary.
There's a guy named Dan Ariely's done a heap of research into that topic. He's fascinating reading.
He's that guy that got burned badly, 80% of his body. And he's an inch. He also did lots of research about lying. Did you know that? He's a fascinating dude.
Yeah, he's definitely look him up. His studies are brilliant.
Add him to the list, Michael. Add him to the list.
Yeah, no, definitely down the track. He's in the US, but I'm sure we can manage the time difference.
He is that dude is amazing.
So Harps, look, really big thing. Michael's got pages and pages. We just
next time.
He's not sleeping as it is, so he can just go over it.
Just before you wrap up, though, that last question you asked about that first thing you can do, what do you think, something that's really easy and there's no excuses for anyone? What about stillness? People call it mindfulness, meditation. I'm just talking about stillness.
Yeah, definitely. I think we, including me, we are so many of us, and I don't mean this to sound judgy because I put me in this, like, we're hurrying, like everyone's so fucking busy doing not much, you know? It's like
I think you wrote that today.
We're all hurrying to nowhere in particular. And it's like, okay, this is how I think. I go, okay, so how long have you been busy and hurrying? Oh, 20 years. Cool. How's that going? What do you mean? It's like, well, you know, with all your hurrying and all your productivity and crossing of T's and dotting of I's and ticking of boxes, are you good? Oh, no, I'm on fucking antidepressants. I don't sleep. I'm on anti-anxiety. Well, let's maybe stop doing what doesn't work. What about, you know, like you said, stillness? What about reflection? What about, and even back to more practical questions like, why do you spend money on shit that you don't need? Like, what just down to real, because all of this can kind of integrate. Because it's almost like we build this reality for us that makes it hard to be happy. Like, it only dawned on me, this is dumb, I'm embarrassed to say this, but, you know, because I used to, well, I earn okay money, but I'd keep buying more expensive and more expensive cars, not to show off, but just because I like cars. But it dawned on me that I was basically building a reality for me that meant I had to keep producing all this shit that took me away from the stuff that actually really mattered. So now, you know, 56 and earning good dough and blah, blah, I drive a fucking Suzuki. Couldn't be happier. Suzuki Swift. I might downgrade to something. I don't know what's below that.
A scooter.
But, you know, who knows? But it's, you know, there's lots of kinds of wealth, and our society has an obsession, I believe, with the wrong kind.
Yeah, we'll get into Eastern philosophy and the parallels there, maybe on the next one.
Maybe. Well, we'll see if you pay the invoice for this one first.
I told you.
Because you fuckers know I'm all about the cash.
We love you so much, mate. You've been a star.
we'll pay you in something. I don't know, we'll find something. Yeah.
Or maybe when Corona's over, we'll manage a 3-way spoon on the fucking couch of love.
Something like that.
Hang on, he's wearing the T-shirt. That's got to be worth something.
Speaking of that,
Right,
we're
boys.
going to plug
Product
Harps
placement.
now. So Harps, where can people get a hold of you? What's the website
Don't come to my joint.
details?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
CraigHarper.net, and lots of free shit on there.
And you've got mentoring programs. You've got any live events.
So all that stuff, and whiteboard lessons on Insta. That'll do. Don't follow my podcast. Just stay on this podcast. This is the one that you guys need. So we're not even going to talk about mine. Stay on this.
It's called
tune in. You're up to about 200,
it's called the U Project. Yeah.
Oh, we did. Yeah, but it's very sweary and it's very politically incorrect, and I'm very non-spiritual on a lot of episodes.
This is why we love you.
But you're conscious.
I'm aware of my flaws.
Guys, we'll wrap it up there. For everyone listening, please hit the subscribe button below down here. For those listening to the podcast, hit the subscribe button on your podcast. We love to get your feedback as well. Harps, thank you very, very much for being a part of this. And Michael, as always,
thank you so much.
Thank you for putting the questions together, because I went to Packy Tech. I can't write shit. So
thank you both. Yeah.
Thanks, boys. I love you both. And by the way, you're really doing good things. And it's, you two are, I mean, you're already on the journey, but the last few years, you've both really, I don't mean that sound like a platitude or condescending, but like growing in leaps and bounds. And not only, the great thing that you're doing now is you're sharing and teaching and tapping into others. And it's in the doing of that you're going to grow the most. So I'm excited to see how the podcast goes, and I'm excited to be a part of it whenever you want me.
Cheers, mate.
Fantastic.
Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
See you, boys.